I've never been in a situation quite like this before, which is why I forgot to take my hat off during the national anthem. Sorry about that. The introduction, as you've heard 3 or 4 times already, is very long, so let me just begin by saying to whom it may concern. I've been on this campus many times and for many reasons during the past 23 years, from redesigning space in the art department and speaking at a children's literature conference to babbling on about myself and my books at Henry Barnard. I've even been on this stage before, only then it was to play the Mad Hatter in Cumberland High School's version of Alice in Wonderland. Perhaps you heard about it. No, maybe not. I wonder if I'll ever be up here without something unusual on my head. In any event, I've never been as pleased to be up here as I am today. Over the past 12 years, I have spoken to students at every level of the torturous educational process, from kindergartners in Sacramento to graduate architects at Columbia, but I've never before addressed students at commencement. It's hardly surprising then that after a few wonderful moments of smug satisfaction, my second reaction to your president's invitation was that this is a serious responsibility. I mean, this is a major event. People will be wearing suits and special outfits. In Roberts Hall, there will probably be at least one example of every picture-taking contraption ever invented, and still a few people will have forgotten to get new batteries. Just to get there, and I wasn't even thinking about the weather, people will have wended their way through the streets of Providence and North Providence, around this institution, a labyrinthian arrangement of innocent-looking streets that would have tested Theseus himself, and then, unlike the intrepid Greek, they will have had to park, somehow, somewhere. But you made it. That's what's important. Your condition and expectations rattled around in my mind, and one thing became very clear. Either this talk had better be worth it, or the podium had better be large and close to an exit. But what could I say that would not only justify your trip here today, through that weather, but also be an appropriate tribute to the portion of a much longer journey which is being celebrated by this gathering? As one who is generally more optimistic about the past than the future, when in doubt, I always look back. To put the challenge in perspective, I turned to history, my own. I began thinking about the 2 commencements in which I have participated as a student. Who spoke? What was said? What did it mean? I have absolutely no recollection whatsoever. Either I had been much too concerned about collecting the degree without tripping, or, as is probably the case, preoccupied with how a nylon robe feels when it starts to stick to you. This, incidentally, is my first winter commencement. That's not going to be a problem here today. No matter what the reason, I remembered nothing of what was said other than my name, which is, after all, the reason I was there in the first place. So I thought, why should it be any different here today? Immediately, I began to relax. I said, so what if I don't always make sense? So what if I resort to platitudes? Not to be confused with the group that gave us When Smoke Gets in Your Eyes in the 50s. Not to be confused with our foreign policy. So what? I said, so what if I'm a tad boring? My confidence was growing very rapidly. I figured even if you weren't preoccupied or distracted during the talk, I was sure that by the time you got out of the parking lot, my words would have faded considerably. But then, on the off chance that a few of you do make it through the parking lot with recent memory intact, that trip back through the labyrinth will surely finish it off. Completely at ease, then, I proceeded to organize my thoughts. What can I say that would make a difference in a world where so many people have something to say and so little of it seems to make a difference? Should I address the greatest challenge of the future, a problem which threatens the entire planet at the close of this troubled century? No. I mean, could I really talk for 10 minutes about the critical shortage of reasonably priced parking? No. That didn't sound too hopeful. Perhaps I was aiming too high. It might be better, I thought, to get homey, to offer some advice from the heart. At least it might be useful. But then urging you to avoid using flat roofs because they always leak just doesn't have that inspirational ring to it, no matter how heartfelt that advice may be. So after going around in circles for at least 6 minutes, I began thinking about what I do, why I do it, and most importantly, why I believe in it. I encourage people, whenever the opportunity presents itself, and occasionally when it doesn't, to ask themselves why things look the way they do. In my books, I illustrate complicated pieces of architecture and systems in such a way as to emphasize the common sense and logic behind their creation. I don't do this to demystify as much as to make accessible and to remind all my readers of their imaginative and practical potential. I also teach drawing, and this I do to help people distinguish between what they see and what they think they see. Drawing is basically a three-part process: looking, thinking, and recording. Having to record something on a piece of paper ensures that both looking and thinking will occur. The combination of the two, looking and thinking, is what I call seeing. So this talk, then, is about seeing, about the importance of using our eyes and our brains and the insidious dangers of not. I'm certain that we would all be better off if everyone in college took drawing, simply because the better we see, the more likely we are to be curious. Lack of curiosity is the first step towards visual illiteracy, and by that I mean not really seeing what is going on around us. Now, on one level, avoidance of simultaneous looking and thinking results in ugly buildings, endless rows of neon signs, advertising agencies, political marketing consultants, Smurfs, Barbie dolls, and in general, mediocrity. But on another, much deeper level, it threatens to turn us into pod people, insensitive, incapable, and ultimately helpless victims in a world of increasing complexity and decreasing humanity. Now, perhaps you're thinking, can I avoid these dire consequences just by drawing the head of a sailor on a matchbook and sending it to someplace in Connecticut for a free evaluation of my artistic potential? Well, anything's possible in the nutmeg state. After all, they did get rid of those toll booths, but I wouldn't count on it. A drawing lesson. Let's say a dog walks across this platform. You glance discreetly from side to side just to make sure it isn't you, that there really was a dog on the stage. Your confidence slowly returns, and eventually there's no question about it. There was a dog on the stage, not a horse, but a dog, and a beagle-y type rather than a wolfhound. But not so fast. If I passed out 1,000 pieces of paper and 1,000 pencils and asked you to draw the dog once it had left the stage, what would I get? Maybe 2 believable dogs, 13 in the ballparks, 215 you gotta be kiddings, 64 creatures that should be put down immediately, and about 916 slightly chewed pencils. And in your defense, many of you would say, but I can't draw a straight line. Well, there are 2 problems with that argument. First of all, the only straight line in the canine world is the invisible one between beast and fire hydrant. And second, as I've already mentioned, drawing has much less to do with marks and the marks you make than with the thoughts you have. We are all able, with very little information, to recognize things with reasonable certainty. The dog needn't have been on the stage for more than a fraction of a second for us to mentally record its presence. But look at your picture. You call that a dog? That's a mutant peanut on 4 sticks. And all those years of dog watching and no seeing. Allow me to make a slight leap of subject matter here to bathrooms. You're probably wondering where this is going. Well, it's going to bathrooms for just a moment. When did you last really look at a bathroom? We take them for granted, at least until something breaks down. We know them so well that in the middle of the night, in the dark, we can wander in and out, usually without incident. And yet, if I asked you to draw a picture of your toilet, could you do it? What are the proportions? Where is it concave and where is it convex? What does its shape tell you about the way it works? I mean, we're almost talking about a member of the family here. And speaking of members of the family, we can recognize them from only a few slight hints up to 700 feet away. And yet, if I ask you to draw your mother or your brother, could you do it without insulting them? Obviously, it isn't necessary to know every detail about how something looks, and in fact, it would be quite impractical. But it does suggest that the more familiar something is to us, the less attention we pay to it. And this is a bad and even dangerous habit. Now, on a second piece of paper, continue to imagine, I ask you to draw a dog fight. Think about it for a minute. A dog fight. What would you draw? Again, based on my experience, the most common image would be that of 2 or 3 dogs doing a minuet. So there'll be no mistaking the subjects. They are invariably frozen in position to reveal each tooth and claw. But while the subject matter may be dogs, the problem was a dog fight. And a dog fight is anything but frozen. It's chaos, motion, noise, fear. It's very much like the minuet to those of us who don't dance. So now the problem of drawing has become more complicated. Not only must we look harder at the subject matter, but we must select from among the details the information which best conveys the message. Simply recording everything is not the point. Drawing is selecting from that which is seen in order to communicate. So you can put your pencils away now. The problem of not really seeing sounds inoffensive enough. But as soon as not paying attention becomes a habit, we start accepting our visual environment without question. As technology becomes more complicated, more increasingly complex, we are able less and less to actually see how things work. Switches and buttons, or switins and butches, are hidden behind plates. Just keep on moving. Just flip, push, but don't ask questions. That's basically how we're treated. The skeletons of buildings are sheathed in envelopes of glass and stone. What holds it up? Don't ask eventually becomes don't even be curious. Visual complacency rears its ugly head, and each time it does, we humans lose a little ground. Another major contributing factor to our visual desensitizing is that much maligned, immensely powerful, and incredibly underutilized glowing box around which so much of daily life seems to revolve. First of all, just look at the programming we put up with on television. We try to compensate by purchasing programs from the BBC, who in turn feed their audiences the Dukes of Hazzard and the Monkees. You see how international the problem of visual illiteracy has become. We know that stories presented on the news by news personalities with nifty graphics and live footage often end up as the basis for made-for-television films. And now we're accustomed to seeing incidents invented for television films being imitated in real life and ending up as news stories. Consider the handheld camera for a second. As journalism, that shaky, unpolished image, filmed under pressure and perhaps even at risk of life, has taken us into the midst of countless tragedies and disasters. We associate the look of that footage with truth and urgency and danger. In filmmaking, this look is a very effective device for reducing the distance between audience and action, and more importantly, between fact and fiction. It gets harder and harder to distinguish between news and entertainment. Is beginning the nightly news with a dramatic camera sweep around the head of the Statue of Liberty to the stirring chords of yet another John Williams theme any different than using the roaring lion of MGM before a piece of entertainment? Can you imagine starting the news every night with those 20th Century Fox spotlights waving back and forth, their accompanying fanfare? You don't have to, it's already here. As we continue to blur the lines between truth and fantasy, while neutralizing our innate curiosity by covering up the workings of the world around us, it becomes more and more important to practice the art of seeing. If you're in the habit of exercising every morning, add 10 minutes to the process and draw your cereal before you eat it. If you have 10 more minutes, listen to a piece of music. Just sit and listen. If we begin the day with our senses charged and distinct from each other, I think we have a much better chance of handling the barrage of information which awaits us, and of cutting through it, of managing it, and of ultimately controlling it. And isn't this to a great extent what getting an education has been all about? Your senses and your awarenesses are probably sharper now than they have ever been. But how long can you keep that edge? This is a complicated world, and one that will at least test you, if not absorb you. If we remember that the things we see are designed for a purpose, and take the time to analyze and either accept or challenge that purpose, we have a fighting chance. I teach drawing because I believe it offers the right kind of insights. It forces us to question, and in turn allows us to understand why things look the way they do. In making a drawing, we soon come to realize that the empty spaces on the page are just as important to the reading of the image as the drawn areas. In short, what you don't show is as critical as what you do show. Once we have seen and interpreted information, those of us who make drawings or films or books edit it in order to achieve some specific result. With all those essays and papers so recently behind you, this terminology probably sounds uncomfortably familiar. What about words? What is a speech, after all, but a word picture? In a speech, as in a drawing, we get an overall message, and we get details, and if we're lucky, the two have something to do with each other. But also, as in reading a drawing, we must pay equal attention to what is actually said and what is left unspoken. Listening to speeches is never more a serious business than when we're choosing our leaders, the people to whom we entrust enormous power, hopefully for our own good. We would like to believe that some intelligent, sensitive person or group of people has things under control, and that each time we see or hear that person or group of people, we're reassured. In the visual world, once we stop paying attention, we no longer see the things around us, and our reward is visual pollution. In the political world, once we stop paying attention and start taking things for granted, we lose control. We ignore our responsibility and forego our right to shape our individual lives and the lives of countless generations to come. While I am suggesting that we must remain curious, I am not advocating suspicion, at least not as a way of life. We shouldn't always be looking for negative things, but rather remaining open to both good and bad, and unlike the evening television, be able to distinguish one from the other. The next time a leader is to address you on television, think Olympic ice skating. And have some numbered cards ready. The one in your left hand will score performance, that is, degree of difficulty, appearance of sincerity, width and durability of smile. The card in your right hand is for substance. Depending on your political persuasion, you might wish to put the left card in the right hand and the right card in the left hand. While the score can be very revealing, the process of listening, looking, questioning, and evaluating is invaluable. Many of you are sitting out there because you've come to the end of at least a part of your formal education, a process which, at its best, adds layers to the brain while removing them from the eyes. And that's also drawing. Receiving a degree means to me you can now see things better. And if you can see a problem more clearly, you can analyze it more accurately and hopefully solve it more creatively. The only disadvantage of a formal education, other than financial ruin, is that when it's over, you know more than you did when you started. And this is no joke. This is bad news, because what they say is true. The more you know, the more you realize there is to know. And as if that isn't bad enough, there's at least one other drawback. From now on, it will be harder to ignore those things which seem wrong or even just inappropriate. It might very well become more difficult to even accept mediocrity if you continue in your daily life the process of discovery, of questioning, and of critical evaluation in which you have been immersed at this institution. Staying on guard is tiring, but if you're willing to keep your eyes open, as they have been for the past few years at Rhode Island College, you will find that this is your world and that you can make a difference in all sorts of ways and at all sorts of levels. But once you stop asking questions, once you stop paying attention, it becomes someone else's world, and you may not like what they have planned for it. For one thing, they may insist on using flat roofs. That's how it ends. Congratulations.
You have just been given a wonderful demonstration of how wit, creativity, and intelligence can combine to open our eyes to the world, and we thank David Macaulay for that contribution to your day.